Hello everyone, my name is Rick van Bruggen from Neotechnology, and here I am again doing a podcast recording that I've been looking forward to for a very long time with my Uber boss and CEO, Emil Eifrem. Hi Emil.
Hey Rick, how's it going?
It's going really well. Thank you for coming on the podcast. You're number 33. I think there must be some symbolism in here.
Well, anytime you describe me as an Uber boss is a good time in my book.
Yeah, absolutely. Emil, thanks for coming on the podcast. And like always, we're going to ask you some questions and talk a little bit about graphs and Neo4j, obviously. And we've got a little quiz prepared, so that should be interesting. So first of all, Emil, many people will know you, but not everyone. Could you introduce yourself? Who are you? What do you do? And what's your relationship to graphs and Neo4j?
Sure. Yeah, so I've been here since the beginning. So together with my co-founder Johan and my co-founder Peter, back in the late 90s, in 99 and early 2000s, we got the idea that maybe we could structure data in a different way. And we got there through a variety of reasons and means, ran into a couple of problems that were ill-modeled, were difficult to model in a relational database. And so we figured that there's got to be a better way. And eventually, through a number of complications and a very non-linear path, ended up with what's today known as the property graph model. And so that was quite a long time ago. It was at a different startup. I was the CTO of that startup. I was didn't start it or anything, but I was the CTO. And since then, I've basically been working on graph databases. And back in 2007, we spun out the IP from that old company and formed what today is Neotechnology.
That has been quite a ride, hasn't it? It's quite a long time, actually, if you think about it.
Yeah, it's one way of looking at it is that this is all I've done my entire professional life. I've always been working on graphs professionally, right? I of course grew up as a hacker way earlier than that, so I've worked on a lot of other software as well. But really, my focus, sort of professional focus for the past 15 years, have been on graph databases.
Amazing! Wow. So, the question I always ask people on this podcast is also, why? Why graphs? What's so good about graphs? What's your perspective on that? I'm sure you'll have a couple to share.
Yeah. This is easily a topic that could fill many podcasts for me. But I think fundamentally it's because I think that's the way to make sense of the world, right? That's the way that the world makes sense to me fundamentally. I'm as an individual, I don't know if you agree with this, describing me as your Uber boss, right? But I'm a very relationship oriented person, and I just think that, and that's on a human level, but I also think that that's just how computer systems and how software fits together, right? And I think that there's a lot of value in being able to explicitly declare and honor relationships in data. And that's fundamentally what the property graph model is about, right? There's a number of benefits, but if you peel away everything, it really all stems from the fact that relationships are first-class citizens. And I think that's how I look at the world, and that's how we ended up with that model.
Absolutely, and it's kind of interesting to me when I talk to users or prospects about this. We always compare it to the relational model, right? And I always say, the relational model is very anti-relational. It really isn't that relational.
It's weird, right? Because the word relational is actually from mathematical relations, not from relationship, right? Mm-hmm. But that's too fine of a distinction. Most people don't know that, and it's kind of hard to communicate that. But it is funny that graph databases are way more relationship oriented than relational database, which, on the other hand, is way more relationship oriented than most so-called NoSQL models out there, than the key value model or document databases, etc.
Very, very true. Yeah, absolutely. So this could go on for a very long time, but instead of doing that, I
No,
thought,
come on.
instead of doing that, I thought, we would do something different for this podcast. After all, you are the Uber boss, so I thought we'd do a little quiz if you're up for that.
Let's go for it.
Let's go for it. Well, the quiz is very simple, right? I'm going to give you two words, and you're supposed to pick a word and tell me why you're picking the word. Is that okay?
Well, that is okay, but only if there's a dramatic way of introducing the question, like, for example, a high-quality drum roll.
Like for example, was that what you had in mind?
Well, when I think high-quality drum roll, that's exactly what I have in mind.
All right, well, we'll start with that. So the first two words are very, very easy to get you going, right? So what do you choose between sports or music?
Oh,
Why?
definitely music. Definitely music.
Yeah.
I'm. So it's funny, now that I live in the US, right, then there's all kinds of sports analogies, happening here in business, right? I mean, I think business is the only rival sort of source for analogies in business is military, right? Everyone goes to military analogies, right? But then the second one is always sports. And it's about, this filling the stadium over there, it's getting to home base over there, and it's third base. It's like all these kind of sports analogies of which I know absolutely none. And then, of course, after that, people then assume that it's because I'm European. So then they go to soccer analogies instead, and I have no idea about those either. So sports has never been my strength. I'm in.
But what about music?
Absolute utter geek in that respect.
Oh, no,
So definitely music. I've on the other hand always dabbled in music. In fact, I'm actually a classically trained pianist, which I sometimes use. But for example, when I give talks about Neo4j, whenever I mention the word relational database, at a couple of events, there's been a piano in the room for whatever reason, and then I walk up there and I play dum 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 dum, the Imperial March, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it even comes to good use in my modern day present role. No, but I mean, I think music has been a very constant in my life, whereas sport hasn't. So it's an easy choice for this one.
Absolutely. So I think it's time for a second question if you're up for
Go
that.
for it.
All right, here we go. High quality drum roll for you. And the question is USA or Sweden?
USA or Sweden? Well, I mean, I'm gonna have to go with Sweden there, right? So, it's funny. This is the second time in my life that I live in the U.S., and I'm like the least nationalistic person that you'll ever find in general. However, I've observed in myself that the moment that I move outside of Sweden, like, is the moment that I really start loving Sweden. Right, so when I live in Sweden, I criticize it all the time about all these things that are broken and wrong and fundamentally flawed, etc. Except the moment I get on that plane and I land somewhere else, it is this absolutely perfect utopian place that can never do anything wrong. And since I am in Silicon Valley as we record this, I'm definitely going to choose Sweden.
Absolutely. Well, and how does that relate to things like corporate culture and stuff like that? Is there, how would you describe, neo-technology and the corporate culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, as you well know, Rick, I mean, I rant all the time about this. I have the saying, I want to create an American company with a Swedish soul, right?
I wanted to hear you say it.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a weird expression, maybe, but it means something to me, right? So basically, growing up in Sweden, I grew up very much to the left of most people in terms of politics, and not just. I mean, here in the U.S., of course, there are like one extremely right-wing party, and then there's the Republicans to the right of them. Right, so from that perspective, then every single party is left. But no, even in Sweden, like I grew up on the left wing, right, and then amongst that group of people, it's not very common to, how should I say this? Big American companies aren't usually the most idolized organizations on the planet. But despite that, I've actually always had a big admiration for big American companies. And yes, there are so many things that are fundamentally flawed about them, but the numbers speak for themselves. If you look into the Fortune 500, there's a huge disproportionate amount of them that are American companies, and they're just very, very good at executing very good at execution, I should say, in many instances, right? So I admire their aggressiveness. I admire their ambition, the fact that they set goals and they measure themselves to them. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I think there's a number of things where American companies, in general, I'm stereotyping now, right? Mm-hmm. But where American companies don't act in a way that I kind of agree with, and primarily around how you treat employees, right? You treat your fellow colleagues, and that's where I think that Swedish companies, who aren't the most amazing on the planet when it comes to setting aggressive goals, for example, but they do excel, I think, in terms of creating a culture where you have truly individual peers that treat each other very respectfully and very well, and have a more humane approach. And I want to marry the two of them into one company. So that's why I had to say the building an American company with a Swedish soul.
So I'm going to have a quick drum roll, and I'm going to ask another question that is very related, I think, which is, authority or consensus?
Authority or consensus? Definitely consensus. I'm a very consensus-oriented person. I think that consensus is one of those words that, people tend to have a very negative view of that word, and sometimes for good reason, right? Because it can lead to some bad things. There are definitely bad forms of consensus that lead to basically, from a technologist perspective and a database perspective, that lead to deadlocks, right? If you end up in a situation where you, as an organization, you can't execute until everyone buys in, then that's not good because it doesn't scale, right? Mm-hmm. But it is incredibly powerful that if you have a small team that is set out to perform a specific task or reach a specific goal, if that small team has achieved consensus around the approach and the method through which they're going to get there, that unlocks what I believe is one of the most amazing, powerful forces on the planet, which is intrinsic motivation. That's how you get really smart people to be motivated, is giving them an opportunity to chime in and through discussion arrive at the method of getting there, and then they feel ownership. And consensus is one way of getting there, but it has to have sort of controls in place where it doesn't lead to deadlock, and that's an important one. But between consensus and authority, I definitely choose consensus.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've seen, I've been with Neo for about 3 years now, and I've definitely seen, you actively promoting it. So I really respect that a lot. So cool. I think we need another drum roll.
Oh, I was just waiting.
All
what
right.
Is that from your cell phone or something?
It is. Yes, absolutely.
It's great.
Yeah.
Very high quality.
Hey, you roll with the means that you have, right? So, lead or follow?
Definitely lead, right? So, I mean, I don't know if anyone else would. This may not pass the not test, right? You want to choose words where, like, everyone would not choose one of them, and I think most people would choose lead here. But I'm still going to go with the flock and choose lead. Ironically enough, I mean, I think that's one of the things that I do believe that we do here at Neo Technology. I think that graph databases as a category didn't exist before we got started, and I think that we've done a lot of work on not just promoting Neo4j, the specific product, but graph databases and the general approach. And I think that part is one aspect where I'm actually proud in how we've led the industry, not just for our own benefit, but truly because we believe that the general approach of having relationship perspective on data is valuable.
Absolutely. And, well, it comes with a lot of costs as well, right? I mean, leading is expensive, isn't it? Yes,
that's very true. And I think there's, just from a whatever business strategy perspective, I think there's a lot of examples where you have a so-called first mover in an industry that takes a lot of cost and effort and blood, sweat, and tears, right? To build momentum around something, and then the so-called fast follower comes in and swoops it away, right? And in many ways, I think that's exactly where we are in the graph space right now. I think that certainly 15 years ago when we got started, but even 2-3 years ago, I mean, for example, when you started, I think it was much less obvious that there would be a distinct standalone huge category called graph databases. I mean, we all believed it, right? We all kind of saw it, but I don't think in general that if you would ask 100 database experts that they would agree with that. I do think that is true today, right?
Absolutely.
So we're now exactly at that point where the category as a whole is about to take off, and we see it in the competitive landscape as well, right? We see that there's a bunch of big companies that used to ignore graph databases and talk about it as a niche that we now know are building out proper, full-blood property graph implementations and take them to the market. So it's a very interesting time in the graph database space right now.
Very true. So one more, okay?
Sure, go for it.
I'm going to use this in presentations.
Of course. I mean, it's just that good.
It's so good. Okay, focus or platform?
Focus or platform? Wow. Okay, that's a hard one because I want to choose both of them, right?
Yeah.
But if I have to choose, it's going to be focus, because I think that you build out a platform through a focused product. Because a focused product is what ultimately delivers the most value to users. And I always had this I don't know what do you call it, if it's a motto or a mantra or something. But when I was very heavily involved with designing the product, right, which unfortunately or maybe fortunately, I don't know, I no longer have the bandwidth to do. But I always had the saying where it's like, when in doubt, leave it out. Right. And whenever I or we had any kind of concerns, like, is this feature truly needed by everyone, we would leave it out. Because I think that all great things, all great products out there that at least that I admire, have a strict focus to them, and I think that's how you get broad adoption, and from there you can then build out laterally in the product, which ultimately will create a platform. So if I have to choose, I'm going to go with focus.
Absolutely. Well, it sort of also makes me think, at least, and part of the reason why I asked the question is the crossing the chasm analogy of Jeffrey Moore, right?
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. Well, Emil, I think we're going to wrap up here. It's almost 20 minutes into the podcast. So,
oh, wow. Thanks when you're having fun.
It does. It really does. I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast. I think all of the listeners will really appreciate it as well. And thank you also for building a great company and a great product together with all of us.
Together with many people, and very much including yourself, Rick. And this podcast, I mean, I was just mentioning this to Rick, for the listeners, I was just mentioning this to Rick before we got started, that I don't think I've listened to every single episode. There's maybe one or two that I haven't listened to, but I'm the biggest fan of this podcast, and I think I think it's a treasure trove of how people thought about graph databases, and I think we're going to look back on it 10 years from now and just hear voices actually from the source at the early beginning of this amazing category.
I hope so too. Thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you and meeting you again very, very soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick.
Cheers, man. Bye.
Bye-bye.